welcome to today's presentation on achieving Windows compliance with InSpec. Let's go ahead and get started. Joe, why don't you kick us off by telling our audience a bit more about yourself and what we'll be covering here today.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining today and thanks for the introduction, Janie. So as you said, let's get started with introductions. My name is Joe Gardner. I'm a Senior Solutions Architect at Chef. I'm based in Europe in the London office. And with me is Christoph. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Christoph.
Hello, I'm Christoph Hartmann. I'm engineering lead for compliance and one of the InSpec creators. And I'm happy to do the talk with you today, Joe.
Cool, so let's start off with the agenda for the session today. So we're going to start off looking sort of conceptually at Chef's approach to automating compliance. Then we're going to jump into a demonstration where we're going to look specifically at Windows technologies, Microsoft technologies, and how we can assess and remediate those servers that we're managing. Then Christoph is going to talk a little bit about how you can implement some of what you've seen in the demonstration in your own organization. And then we're going to finish off by just going through some of the resources that you've seen us use in the session today, where you can find them. And there'll also be an opportunity for some questions and answers at the end of the session. So I'm going to start off talking about what Chef means when we talk about automating compliance. I'm actually just going to share my screen, so I'll start that off in the background. So if we think about the trend we're seeing in IT at the moment, it's really around automating as much as possible, right? So we're looking at how we can orchestrate our infrastructure deployment, automate the deployment and configuration changes required within our applications. And Chef really believes that security and compliance should be part of the efforts that we're already making to automate existing processes in our organization. And actually, we believe that compliance shouldn't be sort of a separate silo or an afterthought in the way that we operate our systems. It should actually be part of those automated processes. So it becomes sort of a seamless part of the way that we work in our business. Christoph, can you see my screen share?
No, not yet, Joe.
Okay, we'll just give it a second to get started. You should see a Star Wars scene pop up in a minute. It's my desktop background, so let me know when you do. The obligatory Star Wars background, of course. Okay, apparently you can see it. Is that right, Christoph?
I can't see it.
Okay, cool. Apparently it's come through. Okay, cool, great. Thank you, audience members, for letting me know. So let's think about where we start when we talk about compliance. But it all starts with our infrastructure, right? And what we're seeing more and more of now is this move towards hybrid IT. So you could be running back-end systems. Maybe these are your databases. Maybe you're running your front-end, more ephemeral services in cloud infrastructure. And you've probably got some kind of link between this. And this is really the trend that we're starting to see. Now, how do you get some kind of understanding of the state of these systems and also establish a way of continuously auditing them on a regular schedule that fits in with how you're already working? Well, it all starts with the Chef client. And by installing the Chef client on the servers that we're running in this hybrid environment, we're able to establish an interface from the rest of the Chef platform and tooling to the nodes that we want to start to audit. And so by installing the client, we can establish what we call a baseline of compliance. And we do this through the Chef compliance capability. Now, what Chef compliance lets us do is execute a set of tests written in a language called InSpec that represents a common baseline of security, or perhaps an industry standard. So we could think about things like ISO 27001, PCI DSS, these types of standards. Well, very often, they come in the form of huge bits of documentation, right? So massive PDFs, maybe you've got some guidance on how you implement that particular technical control. But essentially, what we've done with InSpec is we've taken this documentation and made it executable against our systems. So essentially, we now have executable documentation. We're representing those security controls as code. Now, Chef runs on this box on a default schedule of 30 minutes. Of course, you can change that. And that means that every 30 minutes, we're now able to execute a scan or a set of tests based on either a standard, as I mentioned, or potentially a set of tests that you've defined in your organization. What's the outcome of that? Well, unsurprisingly, this produces a lot of data. And what do we do with that data? Well, it's collected and presented in another Chef component. This is Chef visibility. And what we get here is a dashboard and a reporting mechanism that interprets the data being collected and presents it to us in a way that's easy to understand and therefore easy to action. So what we've got here, this initial workflow, is really the first phase in what you're going to see today. And what we've done is assess the state of our systems. This is the assessment phase. So now that we're collecting this data and presenting it in an easy to understand way, and we're starting to get some insight into the state of our servers and work out where they are against the security baselines that are important in our organization, we can start to give the people who need to see this access. So this could be a development team, an operations person, maybe a security person. Of course, they're very happy because they're using Chef. And what they can do with this information is start to make informed decisions about how they can treat the risks that Chef compliance scans are starting to identify. So they can now start to make focused efforts to fix the issues that we're finding here, right? Unfortunately, we have an awesome tool for managing configuration changes at scale. You may have heard of it. It's called Chef. And so our development team, our operations team, our security team can start to write the Chef code that they need to fix these issues. And so using a workflow you may be familiar with, this Chef code would be uploaded to the Chef server, essentially a central repository for storing our Chef code. And then via the same mechanism that we're executing our audit scans, the Chef client, we're able to download, compile, and execute that Chef code on the servers that we're scanning previously with Chef compliance. And hopefully that will resolve the issues that we've identified. And so what we've done here is to remediate. Now, this process doesn't stop here. At the end of the Chef run, we're going to execute an audit again. And so we're getting an immediate feedback on whether or not the Chef code that we've applied is actually remediating the issues that we've identified. And so this flow from assess or assessment through to remediation is what we call continuous compliance. There we go. So at a high level, that's really Chef's approach and the Chef tooling's approach to automating not only the assessment of your systems against the compliance baseline, but also the remediation of those systems with Chef. So let's just jump back to our slides. So now what we're going to show you in the rest of the webinar is really now going to be focused on Microsoft. And what we'd like to do is take you through a demonstration of the assess and remediate process that I've just described, but specifically on Windows Server 2012 and Windows Server 2016. So Christoph, would you like to introduce the first phase of the demonstration, which is assessment, and how we do that with InSpec?
Sure. So thank you, Joe. I think the separation that Joe just demonstrated between assessment and remediation is essential to just like schedule everything that is happening in your environment. So understanding what's not working as intended in your environment is the first step to fix it. So just what is InSpec? As Joe introduced it already, it's our tool for doing the assessment. Essentially, it's an infrastructure testing and compliance tool. So InSpec provides language to define compliance tests, and also is a command line tool that allows you to execute those. So it's very optimized for Windows environments. It has already Windows 2016 and Nano support. It has Windows specific resources, and we will talk about that later. And I think a key piece we want to mention here is that it has full remoting capabilities. So no matter if you run it locally or remotely, so this is fully supported in InSpec. And for getting started very easily, we provide native packages for Windows, but also for macOS, Red Hat, and Ubuntu, which makes it pretty easy to just deploy it on your normal environments. A key feature that is also part of it is like the profile management, and especially if we deal with complex regulations, you normally want to have an overlay at some point where you say, oh, okay, this kind of guidance is really nice, but I want to deviate for a couple of reasons that may be caused by an application, or maybe caused by a disagreement on that specific control. InSpec is already providing a mechanism to do that, and that's called profile inheritance. That allows you to take, for example, our CIS baselines and then just manage the overlay, which is really cool going forward, because whenever we do an update based on the CIS guidelines, you can just inherit from the updated version and still like all the overlays keep available. On top, we also allow to provide a custom resource. So if you have in-house applications, InSpec is really allowing you to define your own resources in InSpec so that it can write your own test. And this doesn't need to be contributed to our open source InSpec tool, which is helping you to deploy that internally and also help you to cover like the 100% of compliance that we want to achieve. So InSpec by itself, in combination with the CIS rules, maybe covers 80% of the guidelines that you need to follow, but with our toolkit at hand, you can really customize it and allow you to get that done easily. So Joe, I would like to go to remediation state now.
Okay, so I'm just going to demonstrate the assessment phase using some of the tools that I introduced in the whiteboard, and then we'll hop to remediation after that first phase. Just give me a second for the screen share to get going.
So Joe, what are we going to see in a second?
So hopefully, here we go. Apparently we're broadcasting now. So let me just introduce what you can hopefully see now. So I talked about the reporting dashboard collecting data that's being produced by our compliance scans. But what you're looking at now is that dashboard. And hopefully, you can see down the bottom here that we have a couple of nodes. These are servers that we're managing with Chef, appearing in the list of servers that Chef is currently aware of. And I can do a couple of things now. I can first of all find out what Chef is actually doing on these servers. And let's have a look at that first. you can see this is the converge status. Converge is essentially when Chef runs. And you'll see there's not actually any information coming back here because at the moment, Chef isn't handling any of this server's configuration. This is just a vanilla 2012 server using the default image on Azure. So I haven't changed any of the configuration at this point. But I also have available here this compliance status. Now, this is where I can see information about the compliance scans that I'm executing on this box using Chef Client and InSpec. And once again, currently there's no information being presented because I haven't actually started scanning yet. So once I start that process, we'll check back here and see what the results are. Now, when I deployed these servers, I'm looking at the Chef server UI, by the way, now. I configured their run list, as in what Chef's actually going to run on the box when the client executes. And you can see down here at the bottom of the dashboard that we have this run list and base. Now that base is a role. And really we use roles to collect together sort of logical groupings of Chef code. For example, you might have a web role, and in that web role you would have a cookbook for managing IIS, maybe a cookbook for managing SSL certificates, a cookbook for managing your host file, and you'd group those together into a web role. So in my case, I have a base role, and that base role might represent the configuration that I expect to be in place across all of the servers that I'm managing. It could be install a monitoring agent, a backup agent, that kind of thing. And for me, this seems really relevant because we're probably going to want to make sure that we have auditing in place across all of our servers. And so because this base role has already been applied to the two servers that I showed you a second ago, any changes I make here will be applied to both of them. And of course, if I had 100 servers or 1,000 servers, the same would be true. So you may notice I already have an audit role. And in this audit role, I have a run list. The run list here is the audit cookbook. And in a minute, Christoph's going to explain what the audit cookbook actually does. But I want to set up auditing across both of my servers. So I'm going to use the base role to do that and just add my audit role into the base role. Just refresh the UI, and there we go. We can see that I have my audit role in there. Now, I have an RDP session here to my two lab nodes. I don't have Chef running on a schedule for demonstration purposes, so I'm just going to run Chef Client on both of them manually. So, Christoph, while we wait for this to run, perhaps you could explain what the audit cookbook does.
Sure. The audit cookbook essentially is a wrapper cookbook inside of available for Chef Client that allows you to run InSpec. So essentially what's running, it's helping you to use the capabilities in Chef Server, as you've seen, to just add this into your Chef Client run, and then you can schedule a run for InSpec like as you configure the Chef Client. And like as you see it right now, so once the go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I cut you off. I was going to say you can see that there's a remote resource being referenced here. What's happening there?
So what's happening here is that InSpec is executed by Chef, and then InSpec figures out based on the configuration you had in Chef Server that you configured a remote location for that profile. InSpec is downloading that profile and executing it locally. So once it's executed, it reports the result back to Chef Visibility, and so that we can see the results in our dashboard.
Cool. 2016 is taking a little bit of time to run. We'll give that a second, but let's check back to Automate, because we can see that the 2012 node has finished, and see if we have any results. So here's the visibility dashboard in Automate. Go back to my node list. Now, this time we should see on the converge status that Chef has actually done something. And as Christoph described, the InSpec gem has been installed. That's looking good. And then if we head over to compliance status, now as you can see, we've got loads of data coming back to us. And this is the result of that compliance scan that we just executed. And unfortunately, it's not looking too good. We have 30 controls that have failed that are considered critical. And let's have a look at a couple of examples of those. So what have we got? Here we go, reset account lockout counter to 15 or more minutes. What about this one? Lockout duration to 15 minutes or more. We can expand that out and see that the security policy lockout duration setting should be greater than or equal to 15. So if you think back to the whiteboard that we started the session with, these types of results presented in this way are going to help us then make the decisions that we need in our chef code to remediate these types of issues. So that brings to an end the first phase of the demonstration, which is assessment. So before we move on to remediation, let's just jump back to the slides. Cool. So Christoph, perhaps you could talk us through remediation with Chef.
Right. So a key question that we normally get raised is, should we remediate via group policy or should we remediate via PowerShell? And in this case, also like Chef or PowerShell, because we use both in Chef as well. So that is a very good question, and based on what we've got from Microsoft, and that's why we reference it here. We have a good position from Microsoft as well, where you should use group policy and where you should use PowerShell. So especially if you're using enterprise workstations, if you have complex scenarios, then group policy is the way to go. If you're going to have a lot of server loads built on Windows Server environments that are not part of a domain, like using PowerShell is way easier because you can use a Windows server. You can just scale them up. They don't need to be part of a domain. You can configure them automatically, and if you don't need them, you can just destroy them at the end, and that makes it pretty neat also to use full automation around that.
Great. Okay. Thank you. So
that's
what we're going to use now is. Thank you. Yeah. So what we're going to use now is instead of an InSpec profile, we're going to use a Chef cookbook. In fact, the Chef Windows hardening cookbook to demonstrate the remediation phase. So let's just start off the screen share again. Give me a couple of seconds while we wait for that to start. Okay, so whilst we were talking, the 2016 node completed its run, and shortly, hopefully, when the next one comes up, there we go. What you can see here is the node overview, as we call it, which is showing all of the nodes, not sort of specific compliance results, but an overview, and you can see that that also has 30 critical failures. So if we think back to the whiteboard, one of the things that I talked about was remediating via the same mechanism that we're auditing. And so I'm going to use the role again, but this time a remediate role in the same way. So you can see the run list this time contains the Windows hardening cookbook. So let's add this remediate role into our base role. Now we want to remediate before we audit, otherwise we'd have to run a second run to get the results of the previous remediation. So we make sure that audit is the last thing we do. So I'll add that into the run list. And then let's just run Chef client again so we can kick off this cookbook being applied. There's 2012 starting. Here's 2016 starting. Cool. So Christoph, what are we seeing the Chef run doing here?
So in this case, the Chef cookbook is really following the guidelines that we've written for before in InSpec. and it's configuring the right registry keys, it's configuring the right security policy, and also the right audit policy. So in this case, it's really like all the configurations that you would normally do via group policy, so they are executed inside of Chef client now based on that cookbook.
Okay, cool. So I guess you're talking about, we can see here that a security policy template is being created. So I assume this is used for being imported into the security database, right, on this specific node.
That's correct. And the beauty of it is it really works on Windows 2012, 2016, but also on Windows Nano.
Awesome. Okay, so let's check in again and see what that's done to our compliance scans. A moment of truth. There we go. So the hardening cookbook covers, well, we have 100% coverage of the profile that you saw me scan with. So we can use this cookbook to at least establish that foundation of compliance, and of course go through this assessment and remediation process to demonstrate that and make sure that our systems are in a expected and consistent state. So that brings to an end the remediation phase of the demonstration. So let's talk about how we can actually start to implement some of what we've talked about and seen today in your organizations. Christoph, we've talked a lot about profiles and sets of InSpec tests. Perhaps we could start there.
Right. So I think especially getting started can be really, really challenging based on the compliance rules that you need to follow. And that's why we ship out of the box, we ship Windows CIS profiles for Windows 2012, Windows 10, Windows 8, and Windows 7, which makes it really easy to implement like PCI, for example, because it's referencing to CIS as well, or other standards are going to reference to CIS. So CIS is covering already many, many rules, and this really allows you to get started really, really quick based on that. And with the overlay features I talked about before, you can customize those profiles very easily. So in case you're not using Automate already, so you can get started with an open source Windows baseline that is still in development. It's covering best practice hardening as well. It's also looking around the Windows best practices in the industry, like CS, for example. But this is really focusing on a specific Windows implementation and covering Windows 2012, 16, and Nano. And this allows you to get started really quickly. We use that in our demo. It's covering a couple of like resources in Windows and gives you a quick start. You can use InSpec, and in this case you already see the command line to execute this on your Windows machine. Once InSpec is installed, just run inspec exec and then type in the GitHub URL. InSpec will immediately download it, and you will see a report close to what we have seen today.
Okay, cool. So you can install the Chef development kit, and that's going to give you access to the InSpec CLI so that you can immediately start testing these profiles yourself, right?
Correct. So based on those profiles, they give you a really good hint of what's going on your system out of the box. So without like starting to look into the InSpec DSL, you can just execute it. You see a report, and you can see how it behaves. I think at one point you want to customize those, and for that it's important that we talk a little bit about the built-in resources. And InSpec is shipping with a lot of resources specifically optimized for Windows, like audit policy, OneGet, package, registry key, PowerShell, in order to be able to run any PowerShell script inside of InSpec. Then we have security policies, services, Windows features, Windows tasks, VMI. So that's really covering already quite a lot of the Windows environment. So in case you want to use InSpec not only for compliance testing, but also for infrastructure testing, those resources give you a head start. And all profiles that we shipped with Chef Automate like CIS profiles are built on top of that foundation. So that means like you build your own profile with the same resources that we have available to implement the CIS profiles. So that makes it pretty straightforward and allows you, without complete deep understanding of everything that's happening inside Windows, you can still use that on a higher level. And this slide is really showing how you normally do that. In the past, we have seen companies writing Word documents or PDF documents where they describe, this is the title, here's the rationale, that's the description, this is how you audit your machine. And that can be translated to InSpec. So InSpec is a language where you can describe the test. So that in this case, it's describe, registry key, and then we're asking that the registry key value is there. But on top, if you deal with compliance, you want to add additional metadata like criticality, title, description. In this case, we also reference the CIS benchmark and say it's part of the CIS Windows 2012, but also 2016 benchmark, and the CIS tag is 2.3.10.9. So which gives you a good hint whenever you see that happening, where is that coming from? And if you have your own in-house compliance rule set, you can do the same with your in-house reference. So that is a pretty neat feature that allows you to
cool, right?
actually, sorry, so?
Yeah, exactly. I was saying this is really cool, right? Because we were talking about how we can make documentation executable before, and this is a real life example of how you can map the type of documentation that your security team might be passing to your operations team into a test, right? That can be executed again and again and across as many servers as you need to.
Right, and that's really helping also if you have different departments like a compliance security department and an infrastructure department. If the document is turned into an executable test, this InSpec profile can be easily shared around the whole company and everybody is able to execute it. So it makes it pretty easy to just see the state, right? Before try to execute a document and just like wrap hundreds of rules easily on a machine. With InSpec, you can do that in a second or in a minute, but turning a PDF document is really difficult. So we now talk a little bit about additional examples. Especially if we talk about compliance for Microsoft Windows, we know that like especially 3 things need to be covered. It's registry key, security policy, and also the audit policy. They all need to be configured properly in order to achieve a hardened Windows environment. And those examples give you an insight of how that is possible. But as we said, like InSpec is not only there to do compliance checking, you can also do your infrastructure testing. So you can ask, hey, is a specific file in its place? Is that user installed? If you need complex logic to find users, you can use our regular expression matching so that you can see that easily. And also you can verify packages. On top, again, I showed you before a full list of InSpec resources. So this is just giving you a hint of how that could look like in InSpec. Normally what you do is you take those examples, you turn them into a simple test, and then you execute those with InSpec.
Okay, cool. So we've talked a lot about sort of InSpec and profiles and tests. So let's switch over to the remediation side of things. So right now there is a Windows hardening cookbook available. This is the same cookbook that we used in the demonstration. As you can see, it's open source and it's been built to meet the DevSec baseline tests that you saw me run in the assessment phase. Now it does things like alter the registry. It sits on top of tools like SecEdit, Audit Poll. But as I say, it's mainly focused on the registry side of things. As with all open source software, it's still in development, so if this is something you're looking at using and you'd like to contribute, we'd very happily welcome you as a contributor to this. And now within the Windows hardening cookbook, we make use of another cookbook called the Security Policy Cookbook. And this is a helper cookbook that adds a custom resource for managing local security policy. So essentially it sits on top of SecEdit, if you're familiar with that tool at all. And via the custom resource, it lets you import a template into a security database that you specify as a property within that resource. It also contains a template that can be dynamically generated based on the SIDs that you're assigning to different security policy options. So the template's going to represent exactly the settings that you need to apply to your boxes. And then, of course, via the custom resource on top of SecEdit, that's then going to be imported into your security database. So as I said, that's used within the Windows hardening cookbook, but it can also be used independently. And once again, it's still in development, so if you'd like to contribute to that, that would be excellent. Now, Christoph talked a little bit about DSC and group policy earlier. Just wanted to, as we're talking about remediation, bring up PowerShell DSC again. What we find is that a lot of people have already started work on DSC that they use potentially to establish a security baseline. So using the DSC resource within the Chef DSL, it's very easy to map your DSC into this Chef resource. So if you have already made that investment in DSC, the amount of effort involved to bring that into Chef and make it part of your Chef automated workflow, whether it's continuous compliance or not, is very easy indeed. So, Christoph, could you take us through some of the further resources available?
Right. So I think we talked already a lot about InSpec and Chef Automate, and in order to get started, we talked about the DevSec baselines. So it's the Windows baseline. You can also use the DevSec Windows patch baseline, and that is available inside. Like, it's open source. It's also will be shipped with Chef Automate. So it's really easy to grow into our tooling by using open source InSpec, using those baselines, and once you're ready for Chef Automate, like, those baselines will also be available in Chef Automate. On top, of course, we ship CS compliance profiles with Automate, and we have additional reporting and visualization capabilities, which allows you to easily scale to multiple thousands of servers so that it can still keep control around your infrastructure. While the DevSec project is really giving you a good overview about specific compliance and hardening guidelines, we have the InSpec.io website, which is really focusing on how to use InSpec. It has hands-on tutorials, extensive documentation, and code examples. So I recommend going over there, having a look, download InSpec, trying it out. If you're using InSpec in combination with Chef, then learn.chef.io is the best example to see how you can jointly use Chef Client and InSpec together in order to achieve continuous compliance, as we've shown today, where we use InSpec for the assessment phase and Chef Client for the remediation phase.
Cool, and I believe that there's a PDF version of the slides, so you'll be able to go back through any of the resources that we've linked to after the session today. So that brings us to the end of our presentation. So let's have a look at some of the questions that have come in whilst we've been talking. So here we go. So are the baseline CIS profiles available in Automate? The person says they were unable to find them and they had to stand up a Chef compliance server to grab those profiles.
So this is currently work in progress. So the profiles are definitely shipped as part of Automate. This will coming over the next couple of months. So the CS profiles and the DevSec profiles will be bundled with the Automate package.
Okay, great. And another one kind of related to that first question. What is the story of using Chef compliance versus compliance within Chef Automate? Perhaps you could clarify that, Christoph.
There are a couple of different use cases right now, so not all capabilities of Chef Compliance are available in Chef Automate. So Chef Compliance is specifically focusing on compliance only, and it also is like optimized to use with other tools like Ansible and Puppet. So whatever you combine, it's really focusing on that tool. While we bring more features over to Automate, as we talked about the profiles and the reporting capabilities, but also the remote scanning capabilities are coming to Automate, so which is giving you more flexibility in the future.
Okay. So another one here, can I define my organization-specific compliance standards?
Yes, you can. So based on the, as we shown today, as we define the DevSec profiles and they are open source, you can have a sneak into those and have a look how those things are defined. But you can define your own profile and upload your profile to Chef Automate or run those natively with InSpec. So you can use the same capabilities to define that. So we have been able to define CIS on top of InSpec. So therefore, I'm quite confident that you can define your own like rule sets based on InSpec. If something is missing,
cool.
InSpec is a core open source project, so you can open issues or contribute additional parts to InSpec as well.
Awesome. Okay. Any plans to cover PCI compliance in a profile?
That is something we currently think about. So please go to feedback.chef.io, add this as a requested feature, or go to your sales rep. Especially like we're seeing more and more companies having interest in PCI, and we are really focusing on getting all the features done based on customer request. So use your chef representative to raise your voice and make clear that you want to have those. It's definitely something we have on our agenda.
Okay, great. Here's a great question that's just come in. So what about using Chef Automate to scan Oracle databases using SQL queries? Are there resources available to do this?
Right now, we don't have resources available, but there is a profile available on Chef Supermarket, which is doing Oracle DB scanning of it's definitely possible in InSpec. We haven't had the chance to do that. And again, like if you're interested in a profile, for example, a CS profile, please raise your voice, make clear that you want to use that, or if you're missing a resource in InSpec, you can either contribute or open an issue that the resource is missing.
Great. What else have we got? I
think an interesting question, though, is about what's the status of the DSR-stick profiles, especially for Windows systems. So internally, we have those profiles available. We are currently in discussion with DISA to see if we are able to ship those profiles. This is a legal question that we need to follow, and so I cannot give us like an update on that yet. But we are working actively to be able to ship DSR-stick profiles with Chef Automate as well. So Joe, I have a question as well here that is going regard to the cookbook. Can I build a wrapper cookbook around the current hardening cookbook? Okay, so it seems like Joe is not available anymore. So that, of course, you can define a wrapper cookbook on top of a hardening cookbook. Chef is providing capabilities of attributes, and that cookbook, for example, based on the security policy, you can redefine those attributes in your wrapper cookbook as well. So short answer, yes. Okay. So last question I can see here, is it possible to write an overlay for the CIS Windows profile? And so that's definitely possible, as we haven't really focused on those features right now. Right now in our webinar, and it's very likely that we're going to show the capabilities of an overlay in a future webinar, but that's definitely possible, and we have examples of that available in our InSpec open source repository.
Hi, sorry about that. Appears as though my phone decided to drop me off the call, but I'm back on now. Do we carry on with a couple more questions?
Go ahead, Joe.
Okay, cool. So we have a question about Windows Server 2008 R2 support. Is it supported by InSpec, and what are the prerequisites?
So that's an interesting one. So Windows Server 2008 has an older version of PowerShell, and InSpec relies on PowerShell very heavily. So this is possible, but you need to have an updated version of PowerShell. Also, the remoting capabilities are limited, caused by the older implementation of WinRM. So if you use InSpec natively as a client on it, so that's definitely something that can work. But we haven't done extensive testing for Windows 2008 since the customer interest is decreasing on that, and most customers have upgraded to Windows 2012. So that is currently not a key focus for us to get Windows 2008 support into our environment. Again,
okay.
If this is of interest, yeah, I just wanted to highlight, if this is a key requirement for your environment, go talk with your sales rep or give your feedback on feedback.chef.io.
Okay, cool. So another question here. What is the status of STIG policies, so STIG policies, especially for Windows systems?
I think we covered those while you have been away, Joe. So again, STIG profiles are available internally. We're currently in discussion with DISR to figure out how we are legally allowed to ship those profiles with Chef Automate.
Okay, and we go. Can I write an overlay for CIS Windows profiles?
Yes, you can. Short answer, InSpec is providing those capabilities, and you can do that not only for Windows, you can do that for every profile available in InSpec.
I guess that goes back to the what we were looking at before with some of the Windows-specific InSpec resources, right? So you can build your own tests on top of what we're already providing in terms of profiles.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and this will be our last question. So the last one, are the DevSec profiles included in Automate?
So right now, they are not included with the latest version of Automate, where we are currently actively working on bringing those into Automate, and with the next 2 months, those profiles will be available as part of the Automate package.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Joe and Christoph. We are nearing our time limit here. We'll be having a recap blog post in the next couple of weeks that'll recap all of the Q&A we've covered here today. We, of course, hope you found value in the information that was presented. And if you like what we saw, we encourage you to share the recorded presentation with your teammates or professional networks. That recording will be coming to your inbox as soon as it's ready in the next day or so. Thanks again for your time, and have a wonderful day.